Wednesday night, 12 days into the arrangement, in the middle of a rainstorm that came without warning and turned the city of silver. They had been working late, her at the glass desk on the 38th floor, him 2 floors above, the building nearly empty around them. She had found a third shell company, a smaller one, opened 6 the registration documents and taken the elevator to his floor to show him, because some things were better said in person. She knocked once and opened the door to find him standing at the window, jacket gone, watching the rain hit the glass with the particular stillness of a man who was not actually watching the rain at all. "I found the third entity," she said them without touching her fingers, which she noted only because she noticed everything. He read in silence. She watched his face. "This was opened," he said slowly, 8 months before Nathan's investments collapsed. "Yes, which means it wasn't desperation." He set the documents down. "It was planning." "Yes." The rain intensified again. In the low lamplight, and Claire stood 3 feet away, and the space between them felt suddenly inadequate for the size of what was happening. "Why are you still here?" he said, not harshly, genuinely, with the particular confusion of a man unaccustomed to people who stayed. She considered the question. "I said 3 weeks. It's not about the agreement. 12 days. In the mornings over coffee she hadn't asked for, and he had started providing anyway. In the dinners where they talked about nothing and everything. In the quiet of a car at night, and the weight of a hand at her back. And the way he looked at her sometimes like she was a problem he wanted to keep, somewhere in all of it. The line without either of them agreeing to. "You should go home," she said. "It's late." "I don't." He stopped. "You don't what?" He looked at her for a long moment. The rain ran down the glass behind him in long, branching lines. "I don't sleep well in that apartment," he said. And the plainness of it, the complete absence of performance, hit her somewhere she hadn't been expecting. Half-finished glass of water on the counter. "Every morning tells me you were up before 5. She said, "I know a place 3 blocks from here. They make terrible coffee, and the chairs are uncomfortable, and it's open until 2. He looked at her. "I'm not asking you to feel better," she said. "I'm asking you to sit somewhere that isn't here." A long pause. "The chairs are uncomfortable," he repeated, single quotes, profoundly. "This time. Something closer to the real thing. Give me 5 minutes," he said. She finished the report on a Sunday. It was complete. Thorough enough to satisfy a criminal court, and she had built it that way deliberately, with the particular care of someone who understood that the person reading it was going to need it to be irrefutable, because they were going to want very badly to find a reason to disbelieve it. She printed it, bound it, set it on her desk, and then she sat for a long time without moving. The name on the carry something fragile, carefully, away from sharp edges, not setting it down because setting it down made it real. But it was real. It had always been real. The numbers didn't negotiate. The documents didn't feel things. The truth was simply the truth, and her job, the only job she had ever been any good at, the one thing she had never once compromised, was to deliver it. In his hand. She thought about Ethan at the window in the rain. "I don't sleep well in that apartment. The terrible coffee, and the uncomfortable chairs and the 2 hours they had sat across from each other in a nearly empty cafe, while the rain came down outside, talking about nothing, his father's company, her mother's insistence on practicality, the first case she had ever cracked. Nothing to do with the arrangement. She picked up the report. She took the elevator to the 47th floor. He was there. He was always there. She was starting to think the apartment wasn't the only place he didn't sleep. He looked up before his face reset to neutral. She saw him understand, not the contents, not the name, but the weight of what she was carrying and what it meant that she had come. She set it on his desk. He looked at the cover page. The silence lasted a long time. "Nathan," he said, not a question. His voice was completely level, which was worse, somehow, than any other register it could have taken. Because there was nothing to say that the numbers hadn't already said better, and because watching him was the least she could do, being present for the weight of it, not looking away from what the truth cost him. When he finished, he closed the cover and set it down with the same careful precision with which he did everything. His hands remained flat on the desk. He looked at them. He stopped. He was protecting his pride. Claire said, "He was stealing from me. Both things are true." Ethan was quiet for a long time. She could see the structure of him, the enormous, load-bearing discipline of the man, processing something that no amount of control could fully contain. His eyes were dry. That was almost harder to witness than tears would have been. Have given me more time. Time wouldn't have changed what it is. He looked up at her then, and she held his gaze without flinching, the way she always did, the way that had apparently been. From the very beginning, the thing that undid him most. "You could have protected me from it," he said. And the way he said the bleak clarity of a man who was being honest with himself for perhaps the first time in a long time, that no one in his life had ever chosen the truth over his comfort, and that she just had. "You hired me for the truth," she said, "not for comfort." He nodded once, looked back at the report. "I'll call the authorities Monday morning," he said. "I want to speak to Nathan first." Days. After that, we're done," she said. Yes. The words sat in the room. She had said them correctly, professionally. There was nothing in her voice that should have given anything away. She turned and walked to the door. Claire. It had always been Miss Bennet, the distance of it deliberate. She had always known, a boundary he maintained because he understood. The way very controlled people always understand exactly how much he couldn't afford to cross it. Window, the city behind him, the stillness that was not coldness, but the shape discipline takes when it is the only thing holding something together. "Thank you," he said. She didn't say "you're welcome." It felt insufficient for what he meant. 6 hours. Claire sat in a glass-walled conference room 1 floor below and worked through the final documentation. The kind of thorough, meticulous finishing that served no purpose except to give her hands something to do, while her mind refused to stay where she pointed it. She heard, secondhand from Daniel, that the meeting had everything with the composure of a man who had not, 72 hours earlier, sat across from his younger brother in the living room of a house in the suburbs and watched him understand that there was no longer a version of this that ended quietly. She didn't ask how that conversation had gone. She packed her files into her bag with the careful economy of someone who had always traveled light. Bad called her handler, gave him the case number and the submission confirmation. "Clean close," he said. "Best we've had in 3 years." "Good," she said. "You're all right?" She considered the question. "Yes," she said. She left the building at 6:17 in the evening. Through the lobby she had entered for the first time 19 days ago, with cities do at 6 in the evening. Moving, loud, indifferent, complete. She walked 2 blocks before she stopped. She wasn't sure why she stopped. The hotel was in the other direction. There was nothing, practically speaking, behind her. The case was closed. The arrangement was over. She had done exactly what she had agreed to do, and done it without compromise, and that was enough. It came. Not reviewing documents, actually reading. A novel she had bought from the airport 3 weeks ago, and never opened, her shoes off, room service tray on the table. The ordinary quiet of a night would know where to be. She'd been telling herself for an hour that the ordinary quiet was exactly what she wanted. The knock was 3 beats. Ethan Reyes stood in the corridor of her hotel at 11:47 in the evening in a dark coat with his hair slightly disordered by wind and an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not the marble stillness, not the controlled assessment, not even the fractional warmth she had learned to read in the last 3 weeks. This was something underneath all of that. Something that had apparently gotten tired of staying underneath. She leaned against the door frame and waited. "I drove here," he said. "I can see that. I don't." He stopped, looked at her, tried again. "I had a speech. In the car. It was coherent. What happened to it?" "You opened the door," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. The corridor was empty and very quiet, and the city hummed somewhere below them. And Ethan Reyes, who had held $11 billion and 500 employees, and his own grief with the same unflinching steadiness, was standing in a hotel hallway at midnight, looking like a man who had run out of walls to stand behind. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I want to be honest about that. I haven't," he exhaled. "The last person I let close enough to a stop. It didn't end in a way that made me want to try again." "I know," she said quietly. "You know everything," he said. Not bitterly, with something that sounded almost like relief. "Not everything. Close enough." He looked at her. "You left without. I watched the camera feed. I know I shouldn't have, but I watched you walk out of the lobby, and I... asterisk." He stopped again. His jaw worked. "I sat in my office for 4 hours telling myself it was better this way. That you were right to go. That the arrangement was over, and that was the correct and sensible conclusion." "It is," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm here anyway." She was quiet. "I'm not asking you to." He paused carefully. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give. I'm aware that this has been, that I haven't made it, asterisk." He seemed to run out of the careful version. "I'm asking you not to disappear," he said finally, plainly. "That's all. I'm asking you not to disappear." Claire looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had covered for a stranger at a gala because something in him had moved before his mind could stop it. Who had read 3 books in 3 weeks that had nothing to do with money. Who had said, "I don't sleep well in that apartment," like a man confessing something sacred. who had opened a report with his brother's name on the cover and held himself together by sheer will, and then said thank you like it was the only word left. "I wasn't going to disappear," she said. He looked at her. "I was giving you time," she said, to close what needed closing, to breathe, to close what needed closing, to breathe what needed closing, to breathe must only to what I wasn't." She paused. "I don't disappear, closed. I don't disappear. Ethan not in dient im cointing dive coating quote. Something happened in his face, slowly, carefully. "Let go." He crossed the doorway. She didn't move back. He kissed her the way she had imagined, in the unguarded moments she had refused to examine. That he would kiss someone if he ever decided to stop being careful, slowly, completely, with the whole weight of a man who had been waiting for a long time to want something this much and had finally stopped arguing with himself about it. She kissed him back the same way. When they separated, she could feel his forehead resting against hers, his breathing unsteady in a way she found she liked enormously. "The chairs," he said quietly. "In that cafe, what about them? You said they were uncomfortable." "They were. I've been back twice," he said, "since Wednesday." She laughed, a real one, unexpected, and she felt him breathe it in like something he hadn't known he was waiting for. "Ethan," she said. Come inside." He pulled back just enough to look at her, the dark eyes, the city behind him, all the walls he had spent years building arranged in a careful pile somewhere behind him on the corridor floor. "Okay," he said. And she stepped back, and he followed, and the door closed behind them on the rest of the world. The cafe was still terrible. The coffee was bitter, and the chairs were, as advertised, deeply uncomfortable. And the lighting was the particular yellow of a place that had not updated its bulbs since the previous decade. It was, Claire had decided, her favorite place in the city. She was on her second cup when he arrived, 12 minutes late, which was unprecedented and therefore either the end of the world or something good. He dropped into the chair across from her, coat still on, and slid a folded newspaper across the table. She looked at it. Reyes Global completes record IPO, the headline read. Board restructured following internal audit. She looked up. He looked back. His expression was the one she knew best now. Not the marble stillness, not the almost smile, but the real one. The one that lived just beneath the surface and came out in cafes and in the quiet of early mornings and in the middle of sentences he hadn't planned to finish. "Nathan's lawyer called this morning," he said, "and he wants to cooperate fully. In exchange for a pause. It doesn't matter. His lawyer will work it out." He looked at the newspaper. "He called me last night. Not through the lawyer." She waited. "He said he was sorry," Ethan said. The words came out plainly, without the weight she had expected, not because the weight wasn't there, but because he had, somewhere in the last 3 months, learned to carry it differently. "I don't know yet what I want to do with that." "You don't have to know yet," she said. "I know." He looked at her. "You've said that before. It keeps being true." He reached across the table and turned her coffee cup 90 degrees. A habit she had identified on day 4 and never commented on, because some things were better observed than named. "I have a proposal," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Another contract." "No contracts," he said. I'm done with contracts. Then what? He looked at her with the directness that had, in a hotel corridor 4 months ago, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't been prepared for, and still, if she was honest, hadn't entirely recovered from. Stay, he said. Not for an arrangement, not for a case. Just stay. The cafe hummed around them. Someone ordered at the counter. The rain, which had been threatening all morning, began at last against the window. Claire looked at the man across from her, the man who had held her wrist in a corridor and lied to a room full of people for a stranger, who had stood at windows in the dark, who had said, "I don't know how to do this," in a hotel hallway at midnight and shown up anyway, who had, in the end, chosen to feel something when everything in his history had taught him that feeling things was the one risk not worth taking. She picked up her terrible coffee. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And she meant it the way she meant all the things she said, completely, without decoration, with the full weight of a person who understood that the truth, however plainly spoken, was always the kindest thing she had to give. He reached across the table. She let him take her hand. Outside, the rain came down on the city, and inside the cafe, with the bad lighting and the uncomfortable chairs, two people who had stumbled into each other's lives through an act of desperation sat quietly in the particular warmth of something that had been, against all reasonable odds, exactly right. The ballroom glittered like something out of a dream she had never been invited to. Claire Bennett stood near the far wall of the Grand Reyes Hotel, champagne glass untouched in her hand, eyes moving carefully across the room the way they always did, scanning, cataloguing, noting what didn't belong. She was good at that. It was, after all, exactly why she had been hired. 3 weeks undercover, 32 flagged transactions. One name she hadn't been able to confirm yet: Ethan Reyes. She hadn't seen him yet tonight. She told herself that was fine. She told herself she wasn't looking. The gala was everything she expected from a man worth $11 billion, understated in the way that only obscene wealth could afford to be. No excess, no noise. Just white orchids, black marble, and 500 people pretending they belonged in the same room as each other. Claire did not pretend. She simply stood still and let the room move around her. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was stepping into the corridor behind the east staircase to photograph a document she'd found tucked behind a flower arrangement near the host's private table, a wire transfer confirmation dated 3 days ago, with a number that made her stomach drop. Her third mistake was not hearing the footsteps behind her. "Don't move." The voice belonged to a man twice her size in a hotel security uniform, and he was not alone. 2 more appeared from the service entrance, and behind them, a woman in a black dress, with the polished smile of someone whose entire job was damage control. This woman was found in a restricted area, the security guard said into his earpiece. Possible theft from the host's private suite. Requesting Mr. Reyes at East Corridor. Claire's mind ran the calculation in under 2 seconds. If they searched her bag, they'd find the photograph. If they found a photograph, the investigation was over. 3 weeks of work gone. Worse, whoever was moving that money would know someone was watching, and they would disappear every trace before morning. She needed a cover. She needed one now. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. The corridor seemed to shrink when Ethan Reyes walked into it. He was taller than she had imagined from the photographs, and colder. That was the word that came to her immediately, without apology. Cold, not cruel, not arrogant. Simply, a man who had long ago stopped needing the room's approval and had never looked back. Dark suit, no tie. The top button of his shirt open in a way that somehow read as deliberate rather than casual. He moved like someone who had never been in a hurry, because the world always waited for him anyway. His eyes found her immediately. Dark, still, unreadable. The security guard straightened. "Sir, we found this woman." Claire moved before she could think twice about it. 3 steps forward. Her hand reached up and touched the side of his face. His jaw was tense under her fingers, and she registered the brief flash of something cross his expression, surprise maybe, or the beginning of a warning, and then she kissed him. The room behind them went very quiet. He didn't pull away. He didn't pull away, and that was the thing she would think about later. Lying awake in a hotel room at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, he didn't pull away. His hand came to her waist slowly, almost reluctantly, the way a man moves when he's decided something and isn't sure yet if it was wise. And he let the kiss last exactly 3 seconds longer than it needed to. When she stepped back, her heart was doing something she refused to name. His expression had returned to nothing. Marbles smooth, unaffected. He looked at the security guard. "She was with me," he said. Voice flat. Absolute. The tone of a man who had never once in his adult life been questioned. All evening, the guard blinked. "Sir, we received a report that I don't repeat myself." Silence. The guard stepped back. The woman in the black dress murmured something apologetic and steered her team away with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood that her continued employment depended on reading the room correctly. And then there were 2. Ethan Rayce looked down at her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't simply dark. They were the kind of dark that had seen too much and chosen, very deliberately, to feel nothing about any of it. His hand was still at her waist. "You have," he said quietly, "about 30 seconds to tell me who you are and why I shouldn't have you removed from this building." Claire held his gaze. Her pulse was steady. She had trained it to be. "Claire Bennett," she said, "and I just saved your party from a very embarrassing headline." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one, maybe. The memory of what a smile had felt like a long time ago. "Miss Bennett," he said, and finally, slowly, let go of her waist. "We need to talk." He didn't take her back to the ballroom. He took her up. The private elevator required a key card he produced without looking, and neither of them spoke during the ascent. Claire stood with her back straight and her hands clasped in front of her, watching the floor numbers climb. 34, 35, 36, and doing the thing she always did when her pulse threatened to misbehave, she counted, breathing in for 4, out for 4. Steady. She was aware of him standing 2 feet to her left, watching her. She did not look back. The penthouse was everything she expected and nothing she was prepared for. Not because of the size, though it was staggering. All floor-to-ceiling glass and the city spread out below like a circuit board, but because of how empty it felt. No personal objects on the shelves, no photographs. A single glass of water on the kitchen counter, half finished. The apartment of a man who slept somewhere and called it home because the alternative was admitting he didn't have one. "And sits down," he said. I'm fine standing. He looked at her for a moment, the way a man looks at something unexpected, assessing whether it's a problem or an interest, and then moved to the window. His hands went into his pockets. The city glittered behind him. "Your bag," he said. "Give it to me." Her grip tightened on the clasp. "Excuse me. You were photographing something in that corridor. It wasn't a question. My head of security watched you on the camera feed before you were intercepted. He showed me the footage 30 seconds before you decided to make things interesting." A pause. "So, I'll ask once more. The bag." The silence stretched. Claire opened the bag and handed him the photograph. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes moved across the numbers. She watched his face the way she always watched faces when they encountered information they hadn't expected, looking for the tell, the micro-expression, the thing the body says when the mind tries to stay quiet. What she saw was not guilt. What she saw was recognition, and then something colder than anger. Something that looked almost like grief, pressed flat and held down by years of practice. He refolded the paper, set it on the glass table beside him. Said nothing for a long moment. "Who hired you?" "I'm not at liberty to. Who hired you?" The repetition was quiet. That was the thing about Ethan Reyes she was beginning to understand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight came from somewhere else entirely. "An anonymous party," she said carefully, "with very specific concerns about capital movements inside Reyes Global over the last 18 months. And what have you found?" She studied him. "Enough." "Enough to what?" "Enough to know," she said, "that whoever is moving this money is doing it from the inside. And enough to know that it isn't you." Something shifted in his expression. "Barely. A fraction of an inch. You sound certain of that." "I am. Based on the fact that you just handed me back evidence that could end your company's public offering," she said. "A guilty man would have kept it." The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Less hostile. Not warm, she doubted. Warmth was something this room had ever known, but different. He turned back to the window. "My event ends in 4 hours," he said. "You'll stay until it does? If anyone asks, you're my guest. In the morning, you'll come to my office, and you'll tell me everything you've found, a beat, all of it. And if I refuse..." He glanced at her over his shoulder. That almost smile again, colder this time, and more honest. "Miss Bennett. You kiss me in front of 400 people to avoid a conversation. I think we're well past the point where either of us pretends to have a choice." She held his gaze. He wasn't wrong. She came to his office at 8 in the morning because she had agreed to, and Claire Bennett did not break agreements. She also came because she had spent the night running every possible version of what happened next, and every single version ended with the same conclusion. Ethan Reyes was either the only person who could help her finish this, or the one variable that could destroy everything. Possibly both. The Reyes Global Tower was 47 floors of glass and restrained authority in the heart of the financial district. The lobby alone was larger than her entire apartment. She was expected. The woman at the front desk handed her a visitor's badge without asking her name, which meant he had told someone to watch for her, which meant he had been thinking about her arrival since before she woke up. She tucked that detail away and didn't examine it. His assistant, a composed man in his 40s named Daniel, who moved with the quiet precision of someone who had learnt to anticipate everything and react to nothing, led her to the top floor without a word and knocked once on a door at the end of the corridor before opening it and stepping aside. The office was enormous and almost aggressively undecorated. Floor-to-ceiling windows on two sides. A desk the size of a small country. One painting on the wall, abstract, dark, the kind of thing someone buys because it says nothing and therefore cannot betray anything. Ethan was standing at the window again. She was beginning to wonder if he simply lived there. He turned when she entered. He had changed, dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves already rolled to the elbows, no jacket. He looked, somehow, more dangerous in the morning light than he had in a tuxedo at midnight, and she filed that observation away under things not to think about. "You came," he said. "I said I would. Most people say things." She set her bag down and sat in the chair across from his desk without waiting to be invited. "I found 32 irregular transactions over 18 months. Total movement of approximately $460 million, routed through 6 offshore entities, 2 of which trace back to a shell company incorporated in the Cayman Islands 14 months ago." She placed a folder on his desk. He didn't open it. He looked at her. "The shell company," she said. "Do you want to know whose name is on the registration?" Something in his jaw tightened, almost imperceptible. "Tell me." She held his gaze. "Not yet." The temperature in the room dropped. "Miss Bennett, if I give you the name now, one of 2 things happens," she said calmly. "Either you confront them before I've built a complete enough case to matter and they walk, or something worse happens and I lose my only witness." She kept her voice level. "I need 3 more weeks. Unobstructed access to the company's internal servers, and a reason to be here every day without raising questions." A long silence. Ethan moved to his desk. He sat down slowly, in the way of a man who was rearranging several things in his mind simultaneously. He looked at the folder without touching it. Then he looked at her. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks, and in exchange you'll give me the name. In exchange I'll give you the name, the documentation, and everything you need to go to the authorities before the story goes anywhere near the press. It was quiet for a long moment. Outside, 40 floors below, the city moved and breathed and knew nothing about any of this. "There's one condition," he said. She waited. "My board meets in 3 weeks. There are people on that board who have been waiting for years for any sign of instability in this company." He folded his hands on the desk. "If word gets out that I'm under an internal fraud investigation, even informally, they'll use it. Which means your presence here cannot be explained professionally." She understood before he finished the sentence. "You want cover. I want a reason," he said, "that no one will question. Such as..." He looked at her directly. "You'll pose as my fiancée." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. "For 3 weeks," he continued, before she could speak. "Public appearances when necessary. Access to everything you need. Full cooperation from my team." A pause. "And when it's over, we announce a mutual and very amicable separation. And you disappear." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "You're serious? I don't make jokes before 10 a.m. You don't seem like someone who makes jokes at all." Something crossed his face. "Not offense. Not quite, Miss Bennett. Do we have a deal? She looked at the folder on his desk, at the city behind him, at the careful, controlled blankness of a man who had built $11 billion worth of walls around himself and was now, for the first time, asking someone to stand inside them. One condition, she said. He waited. No one touches my investigation. Not you, not your team, not anyone. She held his gaze. I follow the evidence wherever it goes. You don't get to stop me. The silence stretched for exactly 4 seconds. Agreed, he said. She reached across the desk and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm. He let go exactly when he should have. Welcome to Reyes Global, Miss Bennett, he said. Try not to blow up my company. She picked up her bag and stood. I'll try, she said. No promises. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her, quieter than before, stripped of the professional edge. The name, he said. You already know it, don't you? She paused with her hand on the doorframe. Yes, she said, and she left before he could ask again. The engagement was announced on a Tuesday. Daniel sent a press release at precisely 9 in the morning. 2 paragraphs, carefully worded, accompanied by a photograph taken the previous afternoon in the lobby of the tower. Claire had not been warned about the photograph. She had been standing near the reception desk, reviewing a document when Ethan appeared beside her, said look up in a low voice, and placed his hand at the small of her back, just as the company photographer raised his camera. She had looked up. The photograph showed a woman gazing at a man with something that could very easily be mistaken for trust. She had not spoken to him for the rest of the day. By Wednesday morning, the story was in 6 financial publications and 2 lifestyle magazines. And Claire's phone, a secondary device she used only for this assignment, had 17. Missed calls from her handler at the independent auditing firm that had contracted her. She called back from the stairwell on the 31st floor, where the signal was good and no one came. Tell me this is strategy, her handler said. It's strategy, she said. Claire, 3 weeks. I need 3 weeks, and I need to be inside that building without anyone asking questions. This is the fastest way. A long pause, and Reyes himself. He's cooperating? She thought about the way he had placed his hand at the small of her back. The precise, impersonal geometry of it, close enough to be convincing, careful enough to be nothing at all. He's cooperating, she said. The first public appearance was a charity dinner on Friday evening, hosted by the Greyes Foundation at a rooftop venue with a view of the harbor. Claire wore a dress she had not chosen. It had been sent to her hotel room that morning in a white box with no note. Deep green silk that fit as though it had been made for her, which she strongly suspected it had. She arrived at the venue to find Ethan already there, speaking with a group of older men near the bar. He saw her cross the room toward him and did something she didn't expect. He stopped speaking mid-sentence, just for a moment. Then he resumed, and by the time she reached his side, he had already shifted his weight to make space for her, his hand finding her waist with the ease of a man who had done it 1,000 times. He had not done it 1,000 times. You're late, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. I'm 3 minutes early, she murmured back, her smile perfect for the audience around them. In my world, 3 minutes early is late. Fortunately, she said pleasantly, I don't live in your world. She felt, rather than saw, the slight tension in his hand. And then, unexpectedly, something that felt almost like amusement. The evening moved the way these evenings always moved, slowly, expensively, and with an enormous amount of effort disguised as effortlessness. Claire spoke when spoken to, listened more than she talked, and filed away everything she observed, which board members watched Ethan with calculation rather than respect. Which ones watched her with suspicion, which ones smiled too widely at the announcement of the engagement, and whose eyes didn't match their mouths. There was one man she kept returning to, mid-50s, silver-haired, the kind of tan that came from a yacht rather than a beach. He stood at the edge of every conversation without quite entering it, and twice she caught him looking at Ethan with an expression she recognized immediately. Guilt dressed up as affection. She didn't say anything. Not yet. Later, when the dinner wound down and the harbor lights blurred into the distance below them, Ethan appeared beside her at the railing with 2 glasses of sparkling water she'd noticed halfway through the evening that he didn't drink, and he had apparently noticed that she didn't either. He handed her a glass without comment. They stood for a moment in something that was almost comfortable. "The man in the grey suit," she said quietly, "third from the left at the center table." "Who is he?" Ethan was quiet for a beat. "Why? He watched you all evening," she said. "Not the way people watch someone they admire. The way people watch someone they've wronged." The silence that followed told her more than any answer would have. "His name is Richard," Ethan said finally. His voice had changed, flattened in a way she was beginning to recognize as the sound of a door being closed. "He's my father's oldest friend. He's been on the board for 22 years. Claire looked down at the water in her glass. She did not say, "His name appears twice in the transaction records." She did not say, "I think he's the one who opened the door." She said, "He left early. He always leaves early," Ethan said. And something in the way he said it, quiet, certain, carrying the weight of 100 evenings just like this one, made her understand that whatever Richard had done, Ethan had been circling the edges of it for a long time without letting himself look directly at it. She turned to find him watching her. Not with suspicion this time, with something more unguarded than that. "You notice everything," he said. "It's what you're paying me for. I'm not paying you," he said. "We have an arrangement." "Same thing." "It isn't," he said. And he said it with enough quiet certainty that she didn't argue. The drive back was silent. His car, his driver, the city moving past the tinted windows like something happening to other people. Claire sat on her side of the back seat with her hands in her lap, and Ethan sat on his side. And there was 1.5 feet of space between them that felt, for reasons she refused to examine, much smaller than it was. He walked her to the elevator in her hotel. "Good night, Miss Bennett," he said. "Good night, Mr. Reyes," she said. She rode the elevator up alone, stood in the middle of her hotel room in the green dress for a long moment before she took out her laptop and opened the transaction files. The man in the grey suit was not the source. He was the conduit. The source was someone else. Someone younger. Someone whose name appeared in the company records under a different title than she had expected, which was why it had taken her this long to find it. She stared at the name on her screen for a long time. Then she closed the laptop, set it on the bedside table, and lay back on the bed with her eyes open and her mind very, very quiet. Nathan Reyes, Ethan's brother. She didn't tell him that night, or the next day. Not because she was afraid. Fear was a clean thing, manageable, something she knew how to work with. This was different. This was the knowledge of what a name on a page could do to a person, and the weight of being the one holding it. She told herself she needed more evidence. She told herself that was true. In the meantime, the arrangement continued. They settled into a rhythm that surprised her with its efficiency. Mornings. She worked from a glass-walled office on the 38th floor that Ethan had cleared for her access without being asked. Afternoons, she attended whatever meetings required a visible fiancé. Evenings were unpredictable, sometimes a function, sometimes nothing. Once a quiet dinner in his private dining room on the 47th floor, where neither of them talked about the investigation, and she found, strangely, that she didn't mind. It was not what she had expected. She had expected coldness, and found instead a man who ran at a different temperature than everyone around him, not cold, but controlled. Precise. He spoke only when he had something to say. Listened with the complete attention of someone who understood that information was more valuable than noise. And had a habit, when he was thinking, of standing very still in a way that made the rest of the room feel frantic by comparison. He also read actual books. She had seen 3 different ones on his desk over the course of the week, none of them business-related. He ate the same breakfast every morning. He called his assistant by his first name and always said thank you, quietly, in a way that wasn't performative. These were small things. She noticed all of them. On the 9th day, she arrived at the office early to find him already there, which was not unusual, but standing at his desk looking at something, on his phone, with an expression she hadn't seen before. Something unguarded. Something that looked like pain, with nowhere to go. She stopped in the doorway. He looked up. The expression was gone before she could name it fully. "You're early," he said. "You're always earlier," she said. "What happened?" "Nothing." She crossed the room and sat down across from him. "Mr. Reyes." "It's nothing, Miss Bennett." "Ethan." He looked at her. She had not used his first name before. She hadn't planned to now. It had simply arrived, without asking permission. The silence stretched, and then something in him shifted. Not much, just a fraction, like a door that had been sealed for a long time, moving an inch on its hinges. "My brother called," he said. She kept her face still. "And he wants to have dinner next week." A pause. "He does this every few months. We sit across from each other and talk about nothing and go home, and I tell myself that things are." He stopped, his jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." "It clearly does," she said quietly. He looked out the window. "Nathan is 10 years younger than me. When our father died, he was 19. I was running the company by then, had been for 2 years. I didn't." Another stop. She could see him deciding, word by word, how much to let out. "I wasn't there the way I should have been. I told myself that building the company was the same thing as providing for him. That stability was the same thing as presence." He said it with the flatness of a man reciting a verdict who had delivered against himself many times. "You blame yourself," she said. "I should have paid more attention. You are 29 and running an $11 billion company alone. That's not an excuse." "No," she agreed. But it's a reason. He looked at her then, really looked at her, in the direct, assessing way he had, and she had the unsettling sensation of being seen more clearly than she was comfortable with. "You do that," he said. "Do what?" "Say true things without making them kind. Most people make them kind first. Most people are more concerned with how the truth lands than whether it's accurate," she said. "And you're not?" She considered. "I care how it lands. I care more that it's right." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Will you come to the dinner?" She looked at him. "With Nathan?" "You're my fiancé," he said. "It would be strange if you didn't." She understood what he was actually asking. He wanted her there, not for the performance, but because sitting across from his brother, knowing what he suspected, or perhaps didn't allow himself to fully suspect yet, was something he didn't want to do alone. He would never say that. She would never make him. "Yes," she said. "I'll come." He nodded once, looked back at his desk, and the door swung closed again. But not, she thought, all the way. Nathan Reyes was charming in the way of people who had learnt very early that charm was the most efficient shield available. He was 31, lighter in build than his brother. With Ethan's dark eyes, but none of the stillness, he moved quickly, laughed easily, filled silences before they could breathe. He kissed Claire on the cheek when they were introduced, as though they were already old friends, told her she was far too interesting for his brother, and spent the first half of dinner being so effortlessly likable that she almost doubted herself. Almost. She watched him the way she always watched people, not their words, but the space around their words, where they looked when they weren't sure where to look. What their hands did, where the conversation moved somewhere they hadn't planned. Nathan was a gifted performer, but there was a tell. Every time the conversation moved near the company, its structure, its finances, the upcoming board meeting, his left hand moved to the base of his wine glass and turned it, just slightly, just once, a reset, a recalibration. She counted it 4 times over the course of the meal. Ethan was quiet in a different way than usual. He spoke, smiled when Nathan said something designed to make him smile, played the role of the older brother with a practiced ease that she suspected was genuine muscle memory from years of these dinners. But she caught it twice, a fraction of a pause, before he answered Nathan's questions about the board. A barely perceptible search of his brother's face that lasted less than a second. He was looking for the same thing she'd already found. He just didn't know it yet. After the dessert plates were cleared, and Nathan excused himself briefly from the table, Ethan set down his coffee cup and looked at her. "Well," he said. She met his eyes. "He loves you," she said carefully. "That's real, but I didn't say, but you didn't need to." She held his gaze. Across the restaurant, she could see Nathan at the bar, speaking to someone on his phone, laughing at something, too easily, too quickly. The laugh of a man managing himself. "How well do you know his financial situation?" she asked. The silence that followed was its own answer. "He went through a period," Ethan said slowly. About 2 years ago. Some investments that didn't. He stopped. Did you help him? I offered. Did he accept? No. A pause. Nathan doesn't take help. He takes another stop. See? Watched him arrive at the edge of the thought and pull back from it. He takes other routes, she finished, gently. Ethan looked at her. His expression was controlled, but beneath the control, she could see it now, clearly. The way she could see structural damage in a set of numbers. There was something breaking very slowly and very quietly. How close are you? He said. Close, she said. How long? Days. He nodded once. Said nothing more. When Nathan returned to the table, Ethan smiled and refilled his brother's water glass. And the dinner continued as though nothing had been said. It was the most devastating thing she'd ever watched.